paper, and he was like, I got out of this. They're never going to be able to come after me again. They're not going to be able to try to impeach me twice. All bets are off. I'm free and clear. I'm going to run this place like a king. And so he just started, it was his own bravado, his own idiocy that he thought, I'll do a do-over of the Comey press conference to try and, kneecap Biden going into the election. And he thought he could get away with it. The same thing is, I think, true now. Like it's just his ego. If he'd have just, like you said, returned the stuff, now again, you and I think are being maybe a little extra charitable, assuming that he wasn't planning on selling original documents and that the Saudis and whoever he was talking to said, we don't want copies, we want the only one or the original, because we don't want to feel like the CIA or something is using you to get to us, which is entirely possible. It's still entirely possible. That's the part that I find fascinating. But yeah, I think he thought I can get away with anything now. I can just I can tell him to go screw because I was president, and they let presidents get away with everything when they don't. They absolutely
Well, that's the
don't.
way he's done everything his whole life.
Right.
That's why it's so dangerous. Why he can never get back in the White House, because his entire life, he has always done any damn thing he wanted. The way he treats women, everything, his businesses, the way he screws people. He has always done whatever the hell he wants, even though it's criminal. Even though it is way beyond any kind of norms or anything. And he acted that way as president. He always went way over the damn line until somebody stopped him. Until, and he can't understand right now that this isn't happening like everything else that's always happened in his life, because everything he's ever done before, people have been lenient with him. I mean, they
so
just
what you're
stop
saying
him.
Is,
but
you're saying affluenza is real?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah, I do you find it odd as well? And this is, I'm from Kentucky. I'm sure you're surrounded by similar people on a family level that support Trump or like him and that kind of thing. And do you find it weird that they seem to be railing against quote unquote elites when this is a, Upper West Side tax dodge jerk from New York City who made, second generation rich kid? Like, he checks off every box for what an elite would be. It went to Wharton on a wink and a nod, crap student, but, manages to brag about
But
do they get that?
People, they were never sincere. I mean, these right wingers around here aren't really sincere in what they say. They're not real Christians. If you see Christian in somebody's bio, what's the first thing you think? They're telling you they have biases against people. That's what that word means. I mean, it's not legitimate. They don't really mean they don't like elites. They just like their elites,
Right.
I mean,
that's right.
That's why you hear, I'm still waiting. Have you gotten your George Soros checks yet?
I have not.
Because I have not gotten my George Soros
I
checks
keep
yet.
looking. I keep looking under every rock in my neighborhood, hoping that there's a weird debit card that they leave. Maybe because they're it's a big secret thing or something. So I don't know. Do you go to the lizard area at the zoo? And they come out of a dispenser. I forget. I have to read my David Icke books. But when again, that goes to sort of the Mike Pillow complaint that I have, is that one of the reasons why My Pillow was successful and why it jumped to the front of the line with other companies was that he wore a cross on his lapel. It wasn't about his behavior. It wasn't about his care towards his employees.
He was a drug addict and
none of that stuff. It was because he knew this particular crowd would go, he has the guts to wear a cross, and that's a gang sign to us, not a symbol of resurrection and redemption and forgiveness and all the other aspects of it that make it a symbol worth wearing. He wore it because I'm on team. It might as well be the T in Trump to them. It's just a gang sign. And and when someone writes Christian in their bio, or a particular Bible verse that's like, eye for an eye type stuff, or a Leviticus grab or something, it's really, again, just like it's gang language. It's like you're on the team or you're not on the team, which is
exactly
the exact opposite of what those symbols and ideas are supposed to mean. I mean, all tribal stuff from a couple thousand years ago aside. That's what they had meant to many Republicans for decades, allegedly. Is there
Well,
a
that's the
recovery
difference
point?
between reading the Bible and carrying it as a fashion statement. I mean, it's
Right. Is that your Bible? It's a Bible. Remember that? That was that was Trump's answer in front of the church when he was holding it upside down, and they're like, "Is that your Bible?" They have a family Bible. I mean, old families have Bibles. They're sitting around. I have one. I have my original one from when I was baptized when I was 11. And I have my Masonic one, which is ginormous and was signed when I became a Mason and all that kind of stuff. Like I have them, and I know whose they are, and I know which side is up. And he just goes, get a Bible. Honestly, they could have handed him a hymnal and he wouldn't have known the difference. He would have just held it up like that thing because it's an empty
you would have
gesture.
opened it up to 2 Corinthians and just
right, yeah. I like both the Corinthians. It's so good. So good. I like
fighting number 2.
Yes, the number 2 Corinthian is the best. You and I, I'm sure, could go off on sort of the existence of and the well-trod territory of Trumpism for quite some time. But I also think, is there a remedy situation going on in the GOP right now? Because I see fits and starts of it. But there's a huge question as whether they can pull it off.
Well, Chris Christie, and don't get me wrong, I'm not speaking well of Chris Christie. I mean, the enemy of my enemy is still my enemy.
Right.
But he has no aspirations of actually being president. He is in this race 100% to try to save the Republican Party. Because if Trump becomes the nominee again, it's over.
Yep.
I mean, carrying an L on your forehead going into a race is already a handicap as it is, and then it's Trump.
Yeah.
I mean, and Chris Christie's trying to do everything he can. And what I love the most is that he's polling behind Vivek Ramaswamy.
Yeah.
I just love that. Chris Christie, they're the guy they loved because he was such a jerk, because he's out there trying to take a baseball bat to Trump's kneecaps.
Right.
They can't stand the guy anymore. But I really believe that's what he's in the race for.
Well, that's because
he's trying to save
there's no
the GOP.
standard. Right. There's no standard. They, especially amongst that crowd. I mean, we're talking about like Talking Points USA, CPAC, those kind of polls and who they're asking, because again, they have to do these like secondary and whisper polls just to see what's really going on. Okay, but what if Trump isn't in? Then what? And then you start to get a real picture of what people either think. Not, and again, like I said about the Talking Points USA thing, that poll where Vivek Ramaswamy was their second choice, where he got 50% of this. If Trump's not in, then who? He got 50% of that, while he's polling overall at 5%, is about screw you, Ron DeSantis, which is not, again, how do you like Democrats? We can fold if we want to. At any time, we can fold our second choice presidential candidate into our vice presidency. No harm, no foul. Even look at the Kamala Harris Biden dust up over racism. That was the big, the singular, I think, weighty blowout of the entire primary season. Her sort of accusation.
That actually scared me. I mean, not much scared me going into that last election, but that scared me a little bit right there, because I mean, that I am more worried. I started the whole Ride or Die Democrats thing a couple years ago on TikTok, and interfighting, that's the only thing. I mean, the wind is at our backs, man.
Right. We
have this. If we show up, we have this, but anything that can crack us deeply. And I'll be honest with you. Joe Biden is an old white dude, which means if you go back far enough, there's some unpleasant shit in his. I'm sorry.
You can swear. You can swear.
There's some there's some unpleasant stuff in his background that from way back when. But hell, man, the man's evolved. I mean, he reads. That's the point. He understands the times.
Right. The point is, look, the what makes the Constitution amazing is not that 50%, slightly under, but 50% of the people that were involved in in signing it were slaveholders at that point, or represented states and areas that were slaveholders, because it was a much smaller amount. But that's the point. That it wasn't that slavery hadn't been gotten rid of at that point. It was that these guys signed a document that many of them, most of them, knew full well meant the end of slavery as a concept, and not just like chattel slavery and the Dutch slave trade and all that kind of stuff to the to the southern United States, but indentured servitude, all of it. Like they knew it would lead to one day women will vote. One day, like they were aware of this, but they made a change in the time that was not indicative of anything up to that point, but for maybe the Iroquois Nation treaty that lasted a short while, and maybe some Greek stuff a long time ago that was kind of a root of let's give this a shot before the Vikings murder us all. So they were not evolved. They were evolving, right? They were making this happen, and it took a lot more than it does today. All you got to do today is vote for more good / less evil in the world. Just do that. It's the system exists. You're good. All you got to do is make these little, changes around the edges and slowly shuffle us, sheepdog us in the right direction, and we will get there. That's the way we're headed. It's the way we've always been headed. It's the way humanity is headed. And the only time we have a problem is, like you said, when we have infighting or we have externalities creating artificial infighting, which is the other thing I think we have to be on the lookout for.
No labels and crap like that,
Yeah.
Joe Manchin, Joe Manchin, and then RFK Jr., who is this is not a Democrat, folks. RFK Jr. is not a Democrat. I don't give a damn what you say. I'm a Democrat. The way I talk, I'm a Democrat.
Me too.
RFK is not a Democrat.
No, he is not. He is what he is a chaos agent. The fact that Jill Stein is running his campaign in and of itself, it should be the biggest.
I did not know. I honestly didn't know that, man.
Fucking red flag.
Are you kidding me?
No, it's the same thing. Look. This is how they actually make these things function. They take someone like Nader, who had a body of work up to a certain point, and they turn your strengths into a weakness. This is what the Russians have always done. This is what the Chinese learned from them post-Soviet Union. This is what Deng Xiaoping's lying in wait, bide your time and hide your strength. That's what that's all about. And they're not fucking around. But they know that they could not, and this works better with Democrats than it does with Republicans, by the way. They cannot just, part and parcel destroy your entire system and start from scratch and introduce a chaos agent like Donald Trump. They have to, on our side. They've tried it a couple of times. But what they often do is someone like Nader, who a lot of us respected, or even Bernie Sanders or Jill Stein or the Green Party, not even her as a person, but the Green Party in general, which I have, internationally I have respect for. Nationally, I think they become an
tool.
They're a tool. They're an outlet for another control point for people who want the exact opposite of what the Green Party fights for worldwide. So they know this. They know they can't bring in somebody who's just, a rando. So Kennedy's history of fighting pollution years and years and years ago has some value. And by the way, if you'll notice, they were scrubbing his image through that stuff. That wasn't just out of the goodness out of his heart. It all just came up. I've got to start doing environmental law, blah, blah, blah. You got to understand, he came out as this rich kid who was busted multiple times for drugs and all this kind of stuff. And the family was basically haranguing him like, look, we're going to give you a redemption tour. Stick to it and you'll be fine. And he did for a good while. And then when his real self came out, he went back to like anti-vax and, and the pollutants that are of highest concern, that kill the most amount of people. Ignore that. It's the little things that get you, and I'll chase it down in a stream and it'll look like I know the specifics of something, when in reality, ignoring heart disease and pretending that's a distraction while you go after, the occasional infected stub toe as your argument that, like, I know the body and I know what goes on is either dumb or intentional. And in his case, it just looks increasingly intentional.
And, I believe, to be really quite honest with you, and I don't mean to go all conspiracy theory or anything
Mhm.
like that, but there's a strain of mental illness that runs through the Kennedy family,
Hmm.
and I think it hit him right between the eyes. I mean, he is. I believe that Robert Kennedy is not of his right mind. I really do. I don't think this is a grift. I
Right.
don't think he's doing this just as a con man. I think he's highly manipulatable. I think he
Hmm.
is really off his rocker, to be
Right.
honest with you.
Well,
Um,
I do agree. I do think he's spun in that regard. I think he is spun of his own doing, and I think a lot of what you're talking about is it's ego. It is. We always talk about what a narcissist Trump is, when I think in reality he has low self-esteem. I think RFK is a much better example, and for that matter, Marianne Williamson, having worked with her and been around her quite a bit. Um, these are true narcissists. These are people who really do believe that the sun shines out of their ass, and the only problem with other people is that they won't line up for the tan. And it's very different than Trump, who is miserable, hates his own reflection, all that shit. Like, he can't stand himself. He hates women because he can't believe anyone would sleep with him, because he knows how awful he is. And then if he knows he's awful, why don't women? And so any woman who sleeps with him must be, the lowest form of life. And since women will sleep with rich guys, that makes them like that whole argument. That's what goes on in his head anytime a woman looks his way. She's a prostitute on some level, and they must all be that way. That's how he views them, and that's why he thinks he can grab them, because he thinks everything's for sale.
and if you understand narcissism, you can just see it. Just he reeks of it. That constant everything he does just
At the Affordable Health Care Act, Obamacare, these are not meant to be one and done solutions. These are meant to be building blocks. These are meant to say, here's the starting point, and then the next administration will add to it, or the Congress or the Senate, they'll add to it to make sure that it gets better and better. Because
Gabe Sanchez,
the opposite,
you're describing